In 1963, one movie and one movie only dominated every conversation and every headline. A movie whose insane production was riddled with scandals and sheer megalomania. A movie that would end up being the most expensive film of its time, with an estimated budget of more than $44 million, which, adjusted for inflation, would be $350 million today, and a movie which nearly cost its main actress and director their lives. But let me first set the scene for you. It's the late 50s and Hollywood is struggling. Television had cut audiences by up to 40%, and the studios had been recently forced to give up their own theater chains. 20th Century Fox had a particularly hard time during this era. After a string of major flops, the studio barely managed to turn profits and was moving dangerously close to bankruptcy. So, in 1958, they decided to bet it all on one massive movie production that was supposed to lift them out of their misery. That movie was Cleopatra. The initial budget Fox agreed on was a modest $2 million. However, that didn't last very long when they hired Walter Wanger to produce the movie. He had always dreamed about making an opulent, historical epic centered around Cleopatra, and managed to convince the studio of more than doubling the budget to around $5 million. Then it was time to decide on who should become the main actress. Wanger had set his eyes on the very popular Elizabeth Taylor, but she wasn't really interested in the role. However, instead of outright declining, she jokingly demanded $1 million and 10% of the entire movie's revenue. To her great surprise, Fox agreed. This amount of money for a single actress was previously unheard of in the industry. Not only that, but her contract also allowed her to have a major say in crucial decisions regarding the movie's production, such as the request that the entire movie should be filmed abroad. So, after they hired Ruben Mamoulian to direct, Pinewood Studios next to London was chosen as the starting location. Here, they built their first massive set, the Port of Alexandria. By September of 1960, everything was ready to go. The casting was complete, all the intricate costumes had been made, and hundreds of extras had been hired. There was only one big problem. The weather. As it turns out, the climate of London is quite different to that of Alexandria. It rained constantly, which was particularly unfortunate because most of the planned scenes were supposed to be filmed outside. Shooting had to be called off for days on end, and the set had to be rebuilt all the time due to it being damaged by the weather. That, however, turned out to be the least of their concerns when Elizabeth Taylor, who was known to often have problems with her health, got a severe cold, rendering her unable to film for weeks. Afterwards, her health declined even further and she developed a fever, so that she had to be carried to the set and back during the few times she was even able to get up in the first place. Every wasted day, the set and crew cost Fox more and more money, so that by late October, the production costed an estimated $100,000 per day. They then tried to shoot the movie around Taylor, trying their best to utilize the set and army of extras. Elizabeth's condition continued to deteriorate, so much so that she was attended to by the Queen's physician and had to be revived by surgeons once, with one news outlet prematurely announcing her death, all the while the set disintegrated because of the weather. Also, The entire time, Taylor, as well as the director himself, Ruben Mamoulian, both hated the script they had to work with. After 16 weeks, the production was halted. At this time, they had spent $7 million and managed to produce a grand total of 10 usable minutes of film. Mamoulian forcibly resigned, and everyone returned to the United States for some time. Fox now had to look for a new director and decided on Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who had previously worked with Taylor on Suddenly last summer and was hired for several $1 million. He strongly disliked the script as well and demanded a complete rewrite, which the studio agreed to, but they were only willing to give him 2 months to do so. When it came to choosing the next location to film at, the studio had set its eyes on Rome, where they replicated the Roman Forum and, of course, made it bigger than the actual one had been, because naturally they thought it wouldn't be impressive enough otherwise. The set required thousands of construction workers and technicians to build and maintain it, as well as so much timber and raw materials that it caused a nationwide shortage of building materials. Then they hired thousands of new extras and commissioned 20,000 new elaborate costumes. By June of 1961, Fox was spending $70,000 a day on Cleopatra, and the film was already $3 million more expensive than Ben-Hur. The studio executives were so concerned with the inflating costs of production that they hired accountants to somehow hide these extreme figures from all the investors. They also pressured Mankiewicz to start shooting again, despite him only being halfway done with the script. So, filming began once again on the 9th of September 1961, but not how it's usually done, that being in the most cost and time-efficient way of shooting scenes in the same location or with the same actors back to back, but in chronological order of the story. Why was that baffling decision being made, you might ask yourself now? Well, again, only half of the script existed at that point. You can hardly shoot a scene that hasn't been written yet. This way, the costs ballooned once again, since various actors now spent weeks in Rome and were paid very handsomely for doing absolutely nothing most of the times, because the few scenes they were supposed to appear in were filmed weeks apart. The immense pressure from Fox to cut costs led nowhere. For example, when they tried to take away some of the actors' personal drivers who carried them around Rome and occasionally onto and off the set, the actors simply threatened to leave production. Filming was also plagued by massive waste and bad planning. Hundreds, if not thousands, of intricately detailed, expensive props that had been made specifically for the movie ended up never being used. It was also speculated that there was some corruption going on behind the scenes, with money mysteriously vanishing and somehow ending up in producers' hands. Speaking of producers, the main producer, Walter Wanger, who pushed so hard for this insane epic to be made in the first place, basically resigned, stopped doing anything, and was then unofficially fired by discontinuing his salary. He never produced a movie again in his entire life. This also meant now that Mankiewicz had to be the director, writer, and producer all at once. This way, he completely overworked himself, having to scribble scenes in between takes to somehow have a functional script, and was barely sleeping at night. His condition got so bad that he had to start taking amphetamine injections every day to somehow get him going. One time, they accidentally hit a nerve while giving him a shot, rendering him unable to move, but he wanted to continue his work, so that they had to drag him around the set. His co-workers later recalled seriously thinking that this movie would kill him. The most opulent and complicated scene to make in the entire movie was Cleopatra's iconic entry into Rome, and once they were halfway done with shooting, with Elizabeth Taylor ready to come in on her giant sphinx and the massive crowd of extras on each side of the road, suddenly the director of photography, Leon Shambroy, said that the light wasn't quite to his liking. So naturally, they stopped filming the scene only to redo it 6 months later. And then there was also the affair. The one thing that had the public and press riled up the most throughout this entire production. When Richard Burton, who plays Mark Antony, and Elizabeth Taylor filmed their first scene together on January 22, 1962, the chemistry was instant. People on set later recalled how you could almost feel the electricity between them. It didn't take long before they started going out together, but there was one big problem. Both of them were married at the time. What ensued was a public frenzy. International news outlets began reporting on the affair, paparazzi were everywhere, and everyone was suddenly talking about Lizzie and Mark Antony. It got to the point where the Vatican published an open letter condemning Taylor, saying she was a bad influence on women and children worldwide, and congressmen trying to revoke her citizenship. Such strong accusations were of course not levied against Burton because he's a man, or something like that. By 1962, Fox had no other movie in production. All eyes were on Cleopatra. Somehow, this movie needed to be a big success. The money was finally running out, the last scenes to be filmed had to be trimmed massively. Mankiewicz was an absolute wreck at the time. On the 24th of July, 1962, shooting was finally completed. At least for now. Elizabeth Taylor walked away from the movie after having made $7 million, which adjusted for inflation would be about 74 million today. Mankiewicz immediately started editing, having envisioned 2 separate 3-hour movies. The studio, however, didn't like that idea and demanded a single 4-hour cut, meaning that 2 entire hours needed to be left out of the final movie. One of the reasons behind this decision was that they wanted to profit off of all the buzz surrounding Taylor and Burton. But following Mankiewicz's plan, the two would have only acted together in the second movie, which was to be released an entire year later. Fox feared that by then, the news frenzy could have died down, or even worse, the two might not even be together anymore. Mankiewicz was angered by this decision, and who could blame him? The man spent the last years destroying himself over this movie, and now he was being told that he needed to cut 2 hours from it? He and the head of the studio at the time, Darren Zanuck, also disagreed on other things. For example, Zanuck thought that the depiction of Cleopatra in the movie was too strong compared to the male roles that accompany her. This has to be one of the dumbest takes one could make about the movie, since in it, Cleopatra has almost no agency and her life is depicted as being almost completely in the hands of the men around her. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Over these creative differences, Mankiewicz ended up being fired, and the two men started a public feud which included writing each other open letters with all kinds of accusations and other Hollywood celebrities getting in on the fight. After a very short time, Mankiewicz was rehired because Fox realized they simply couldn't put the movie together without him. By this time, the director knew that the movie wouldn't be as great as he wanted it to be, but at least he would try to make it good. In February of 1963, they then realized the opening scenes simply looked too cheap, so they once again hired 1,500 extras and some of the main actors to redo the scenes in Spain. Then, on the 5th of March 1963, filming was finally completed. And this time, for good. The movie ticket pre-sales did really well, thanks to a massive marketing campaign and a lot of excitement having been built up over the years. The first critics to see the movie, however, weren't all too impressed. Most of them agreed that the visuals, the opulent sets and costumes were a feast for the eye, but story-wise, the movie felt lacking. The dialogue wasn't always written very well, and the pacing felt disjointed and off. Elizabeth Taylor, who had to be forced to see the movie at a charity screening in London, found it appalling, saying that its heart and essence had been cut out. After the screening, she reportedly stormed off to the bathroom and vomited. Upon its release, general audiences, on the other hand, generally liked what they saw. They didn't know how much had been cut out and were drawn in by the movie's sheer opulence. Movie theaters quickly started to complain that the movie was too long at 4 hours, since that would mean that less screenings could fit in per day, so that the movie had to be cut down again, this time to 3 hours and 15 minutes. While box office sales remained consistently high, it became clear pretty soon that the movie wouldn't be able to earn back its costs. Even after all the cuts that had been made, the movie's length still didn't allow it to be shown as often per day as other movies, and more reports came out about the horrors of its production. Elizabeth Taylor, being very vocal about how much she hated the movie, also didn't help things either. Cleopatra finished its box office run in the US and Canada after earning around $24 million, far away from the $44 million it cost to produce. Only several years later would the movie actually manage to break even. It was nominated for 9 Oscars and won 4 of them. Fox did in fact not go bankrupt, but managed to recover thanks to some big hits like Singing in the Rain. Taylor and Burton married twice before splitting up for good in 1976, remaining close friends until Burton's death in 1984. But Lumar, you might be asking now, what's your opinion on the actual movie? And to that, my dearest friends, I have to say, it bored me to death. In some moments, such as Cleopatra's entrance to Rome, flickers of greatness shine through, and one can't help but marvel at the extravagant sets and costumes. Underneath all of that, however, is, in my humble opinion, a deeply uninteresting movie about deeply unsympathetic characters with deeply flawed pacing. One of my biggest issues with the movie, as I already alluded to before, is that its main character is by far the weakest character with the least amount of agency, almost exclusively serving as the object of desire for the male protagonists. It's truly fascinating to me that the movie with possibly the most interesting production history of all times manages to be so utterly uninteresting. Who knows? Maybe those missing 2 hours would have made it into a masterpiece, but judging by what I have seen, I'm kind of glad I only had to sit through 4 hours of this mess. But what are your thoughts on all of this? What do you think about the movie, and do you know of any similarly troubled productions? I'm genuinely excited to read your thoughts in the comments below. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. With that being said, see you in the next one.